And all these new illegals have come since, and they demand to stay here. And that just adds insult to injury. They feel entitled because they touched down since we have such weak border security that they're in now, so that once they're in, that they can stay, they think. And they're not wrong. So far they've been proven right. Because, well, not just the Democrats want all these votes, some of the Republicans want the cheap labor, they both do. So both parties could care less that the American citizens don't want them here. They don't want the crime. They don't want people that aren't patriotic, that don't really know or care about the history and the culture of this country. And they know that they're not going to be anywhere around them. If they had to be around them, they would end this. They would deport them. They wouldn't threaten to shut down a government over not allowing illegal aliens to stay. It's so sad that we've come that far. We've gone that low. I mean, who would have thought this? I don't think Reagan had this in mind, that 30 years later there would be threats of a government shutdown. Not that it happened over this. I wish the government would shut down each time when there's some threat like that. I've given up, but that would just be nice. It could be like the November 9th up till the 20th, when Trump just led on his own without any help, without anyone holding him back. And that's what it would be like if there was a shutdown. So I keep hoping, but just the idea that they even say that they'd shut down a government over not giving these illegal aliens amnesty, I'm sure that's not what Reagan had in mind when he inadvertently started this. Before him, with Eisenhower, Nixon, there were deportations. That's what it was. They kept sovereignty in this country, and they weren't afraid of being called racist in order to do it. They knew they'd be called that anyway. Just like Reagan's remembered like that from the Democrats anyway. Even though he's the one that started all this immigration, that's not good enough. And same with, I saw comments on the Facebook New York Times page that the liberals were so upset yesterday still, even though that they reported it as there's going to be amnesty for lots, rather not just those so-called DACA kids, but and they were still upset. It didn't please them at all. There's just no point to it. And if there is any kind of amnesty for this, which there just shouldn't be, that is going to be one of the things that it's going to shake up the base a bit, because that's for so many reasons. Not just, I mean, that people don't see the history, that the same Chuck Schumer that was in that, when he knew very well that the deal was the one-time amnesty, that's it, border security for it. He saw very well that didn't happen. He saw over the years that didn't happen. Now he's pushing this again as if it's the first time. He does it because he knows people haven't paid attention, and they don't remember that far back. They don't care to look. They don't care to read about it. And they don't see that they're being told the same thing now again. And again, supposedly it'll end this time, just like supposedly it would end each time for the past 30 years. And so I don't blame these illegals, because they're winning that way. They come, they get to stay no matter what, and not one should. Not one of us could go over there and get to stay. If things are so good like they claim they are, they claim things are so good there that they have to bring their culture here. Why not just keep it there? It's right below us. Why not just stay there, and if you insist on that, instead of changing this over here and insisting on it, and then being allowed to vote and voting to change it to be just like there. And people, they're so afraid to say anything these days that a lot just kind of go along with that, and we don't have to do that. Everyone should want border security, We should be able to have the merit-based system only bring in anyone who's good for this country. That worked before the 1965 Immigration Act. That worked. The merit-based system brought the best in. Why would we not want the best? Are we not proud of this country enough to have only the best come here? We don't have to let everyone come. We're not a charity. We're not a soup kitchen. And also, it's exchanging that for that. It just kind of shows, that we're in a bad place as a country. If in order to secure the border from people coming illegally, we have to let a percentage of illegals stay, that just doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit it. Everyone should want safety and sovereignty too. And I hear all these numbers going around about how much they cost, how much the wall would cost, how much this, how much that. And it's not all about how much it is. It's about preserving your own culture too. It's about preserving the way things are in this country, and if anyone wants to come here, they have to assimilate to it. But unfortunately, and people don't like to say this, but a lot of people that come, and specifically come from Mexico, and that's how it is, they don't assimilate all that well. Some do, but a lot don't. Enough to notice don't. And they demand that you assimilate to them. And they refuse to learn English. They refuse a lot of different things that America is known for. And if you don't like it, they scream racism. And a lot of people are getting tired of that. They're not falling for it anymore, but enough are. So since enough are, they just kind of think it's a given that in order to get a wall, in order to get E-Verify for the employers to not hire these illegals, which are just as much wrong as the illegals themselves, if the employers would stop doing this, there wouldn't be any work. They'd have to leave. If they weren't getting welfare or work, they'd have to leave. What choice would they have? So it's the employer's fault too, so they need the E-Verify for that. We should be able to have the E-Verify, the merit-based system, and everyone should have to go. It's okay if you take out the criminals, the gang members, and the hard criminals first, that's fine, but eventually everyone's going to have to get out. We should be able to do that and have the wall without some exchange for letting the future voters here, for letting them, then their descendants and their descendants and so on and so on. So it would be way more than the 800,000, which I'm not sure how they came up with. I bet it's way over 1 million real numbers, and then how would they know which was what? Instead, what they should do, if you don't have documentation that you belong here, you just have to go. We're full enough. We don't have to try to make every single person on the earth be equal. That's the thing. This whole equality that's taken off real fast in the past 20 years, it's kind of crippling the West. We have to kind of sacrifice our way of life to try to bring everybody else up, but that's not even working. Instead, it just brings us down. It doesn't work. Not everybody in the country is equal. That's just not how it is, and that's the beauty of it. People are different experiences. Not everything's the same, and that's what people like about this country. If you come, you try to compete to do your best. It's not a given that you will, and you shouldn't be given stuff for showing up here, especially based on your background, based on where you came from. You shouldn't get any special treatment based on that. It's up to you to prove yourself. It's not up to the country to prove itself to you. And like Tucker Carlson said, a lot of people think that it's okay to give this amnesty because of these perceived horrible misdeeds of America, and people have to just stop that thinking if they want to be here, especially if they themselves are citizens and have roots here from a long time ago. You shouldn't think like that. That's sad. It's something you should be proud of, because now with all these different cultures here, and with so much division of all kinds. The one thing that I thought we still did have in common was that people are proud of and love this country, but as you can see with them kneeling for the football games, kneeling the high schools and different for the pledge, for the anthem, and different teachers and people, a lot of people supporting that, so that divided the nation in two again. And the fact that that's acceptable, yes, it's pushed by the globalists, but enough people are accepting it, so we can't even have that in common anymore. And well, the globalists, they're putting their divide and conquer, so these illegal aliens are just pawns. They could care less about them. Ironically, the people that they always say are racist bigots are the ones that actually care about people more. They just don't coddle them. But these globalists, they pretend to, and really they're just using them as pawns. They are using them in their divide and conquer. Just like they're using those kneelers, divide and conquer. They could care less that they're protesting any kind of perceived misgrievances. They're just glad to get everybody riled up about it. They're just glad for the unrest. And well, that's not good, but what's sad is that enough people are falling for that, so we don't have that in common, the patriotism. That would be one thing we could still all have in common. Now that a lot of the original things in common that we have are gone, that we used to have are gone, we don't have that even anymore. And so letting these people that don't know about history, don't care about history, are here for the freebies, and they say, oh, they're here for you can't blame these kids on what their parents did. Okay, so if you can't blame, and not even blame, but I mean, if you can't deport the people here illegally when their parents brought them knowingly, the parents shouldn't have done that. They can blame the parents, but they're here illegally. But if we're not allowed to blame them for the sins of their parents 10 years ago, so why is it that people's ancestors that look like me are blamed for what they may or may not have done hundreds of years ago? Aren't we off the hook now if we're on that thing about don't blame the ancestors beforehand for something that happened in the last decade? So are we off the hook for the last few centuries yet? Or do we have to keep hearing about that? And the thing is that they insist on these people coming here from different cultures, and then once they're here, they tell them how much the founding stock hates them. So it causes all this friction that shouldn't need to be there. And they know, the globalists know how to get everybody, how to get each set upset at the other one, how to rile up each one. And that happens more the more people are here from other cultures. And people have to realize that there's nothing wrong with any culture, there's nothing wrong with any of them, but there's also nothing wrong with not wanting every single person to be here. I mean, on one hand, they keep telling us, oh, we're all the same, there's no difference. Okay, so if we're all the same and there's no difference, then why is it that we have to bring in X amount of people from this place if we're supposedly all the same? And then if we're not, then why do they try to then tell us we are? Or they try to tell us, well, we're different, everyone's different, but you owe it to these people because of this and this and that. No, we don't. Not anything, especially to people that insist on being here, not speaking English, waving the Mexican flag instead of the American flag, not knowing anything about history, wanting all the statues and monuments to come down that they had nothing to do with, and wanting to, if you look at the polls, since they do everything on polls in this country, which it gets out of hand, but if you look at it, and they poll them, they poll a handful of everyone, and they ask them if they think favorable of the First Amendment, they think favorable of the Second Amendment, it goes way down with them. And that's just because guns and free speech, that's not part of their culture. And that's okay, but it's not. And the thing is, we keep importing these people from places that don't like free speech, don't like guns, don't like the freedoms that America has. They start voting out these freedoms, so we can no longer enjoy them, and we're bringing it upon ourselves. We're trying to be charitable, and then along the way, we lose what made us. We lose what made America America. We lose what made it the country that people wanted to come to, what they originally wanted it to come to. Now the people that come across the border want to come because they know they can, and they know they get freebies, unlike what we're told, that illegal aliens do get welfare. They do get special stuff. They do get incentives, and that's why a lot of them stay here. And yeah, they work cheap, and then they get welfare. But even if they work cheap and just got that, that's a lot more than what they would get in Mexico, and that's why they come. They complain about the standard of living here, even though it's so much higher than it is there. And they don't try to be one of the handful that can assimilate well, get in line, and come legally. They say, well, that takes too long. Well, that's just too bad. Somebody from America can't go there and say, we don't like the process, so we're just going to stay here. And by the way, give us some handouts. We can't do that in any country. We can't pick a country that we may like better than this one and demand that we can just stay there anytime we feel like and do whatever we want. That's just not it. And you see a lot of these bleeding heart liberals that hate Western civilization say about illegal aliens that have gotten caught committing another crime that they shouldn't have to go because Americans commit crimes too. Well, okay, but there's nothing we can do about the citizens that commit crimes other than put them in jail here. We can't deport them anywhere if they're citizens, but we can the illegals. Like today, I saw somebody post because ICE did a raid, and they did it at different 7-Elevens across the country, and they caught some illegals, and they're sending them back. And then somebody made a comment, well, that's good, because because an illegal got into a car accident with them and didn't have a license. And somebody commented saying, well, that's because you voted against giving them licenses. And that's all they got out of it. Never mind the fact that if they hadn't been here, the accident wouldn't have happened. That they shouldn't be here. They shouldn't get a license. It's illegal. Doesn't matter what age you are. And that's why they have to send the message to these people not to bring your kids here illegally, because, well, it's a shame for them. It's a shame for the citizens here. They shouldn't have to put up with the extra crime, and not only that, but the resentment. That's what's hard to take. Well, crime too, but there's just this resentment in the air towards America and towards people of the founding stock. It's too much, and then no matter how much we do, isn't enough. We're still called all these names anyway. And so it's just not worth giving this amnesty, and that's one thing I hope it doesn't happen. I mean, so what'll it be again? In 20 more years, in 10 more years, in 30 more years, there'll be another big amnesty in exchange for getting something else that the country shouldn't even have to ask for. It's just, how long will this go on? It was supposed to be the last time in 1986, and then it went on purposely because they got these presidents that were CIA operatives working for the globalists who want to flood this country, who are flooding all the other Western countries. It's working in Western Europe. It's not working in Eastern Europe because they're not letting it happen. They have pride in their individual countries. And some of the Eastern European countries don't even get along with each other. Like Ukraine and Hungary, they don't. And they each protect their own borders alone, though. None of them take refugees. None of them even take each other, really, since they don't get along that much. They have strict, even for countries bordering each other, really strict immigration policies. You can't just go there, stay there, park it, overstay the visa. Very strict, and that's how it should be. Like in Hungary, you have to be Hungarian in order to become a citizen, and if you're not, you can stay on your 90-day visa, and that's it. There's not exceptions. That's how they have it, and nobody questions it. That's it. But somehow over here, anybody and everyone, and if you say, maybe not, maybe there's already enough people, maybe this culture isn't assimilating all that well with the other cultures here, so maybe we shouldn't, and people just have a fit about that, and that's not how it should be. And so what I think is that was just that amnesty then, it shouldn't have happened back then. It was peanuts compared to this, because even if somehow they figured out who were those 800,000, and somehow they figured out that it was exactly 800,000 of these DACA people, and if enough actually were kids, though some, they're 26 now, they're almost 30, and they were brought in the last decade. They weren't kids then. They act like these people are 5 or something, and even if they were, it's a shame that their parents did that. They should go back with the parents and have the whole family go. That wasn't right. The parents can't commit this illegal act and expect their kid to have some life over here. And a lot of these, since they aren't kids, they're adults, young adults, they have committed crimes. It shows that illegals have committed more crimes for their percentage than what actual citizens have. And they didn't have those statistics out for the longest time. I saw them come out last week. And that's pretty much expected, but that's what it is. And that just shows they're not exactly grateful. Why would you go to another country and commit crime in it and then protest to stay? It's that attitude that just makes people just not want that. It makes it, if you don't want it that much anyway, it makes you really just not. When you see what really happens, you see the attitudes, and they're not thankful. And so it's just kind of like, if I can't have firearms, if I can't see these monuments that have been up for centuries, for over 100 years, some of them, they have to be taken down because they're offensive, but I can't be offended about the country being flooded by people who don't even care for it. I mean, this culture's getting erased and replaced. Everything that we value, everything that we hold close to it, and people are afraid to say it because they're afraid to use their First Amendment, because the First Amendment, it's getting butchered up as much as the Second Amendment. They come up with this stuff called hate speech, and that can basically be defined by anyone who gets offended and thinks something's hateful at the given time. And in Germany, some other European countries, they have laws now against the hate speech. And again, that's your perception, what you think is bad. And they're having people so weak that they can't just ignore stuff they don't like, say something back or ignore it. That's it. And people over here, we have the First Amendment. Other countries don't. Even European countries don't have the First Amendment. We do here. And people want to do away with it. And a lot of people, they don't utilize it either. They don't say what they want. And they're afraid to even say stuff how they see it. They're afraid of offending. They're afraid of sounding a certain way. Have more pride in your country that you're not afraid to say stuff. And if you say things, even if they might come across as harsh, even if they might be harsh, you're defending your country. You're expressing your First Amendment right. You're calling it as you see it. And that's what more people have to do. They can't get all of us for doing that. So more people have to do that. If we have to put up with all these illegals here, we should voice ourselves more. We should voice ourselves about them taking down statues and monuments of our American history. Some people's ancestors fought. in the Civil War, and they're just seeing them come down for no good reason. Nobody was offended by these statues all these years. Over 100 years, they weren't offended until 2 years ago when they were told that they had to be. If you have to deal with that, and if you have to deal with hardly being able to obtain a gun when it's your Second Amendment right, you have to deal with all that. Yet you're supposed to welcome all these illegals with open arms. That's backwards. What all these meetings should be about is preserving our culture here, is holding on to it, is seeing how it's slipping away in other countries and not let that happen here. We should get back to that, and that's why they wanted Moore out so bad, because he didn't care about illegals. He wanted to preserve what was here. He wanted to preserve the monuments. That's why in his state, they passed a state law that none of them can be taken down. None of them. And none of the names can be changed on schools and roads and all this stuff that they're erasing history. They're erasing and they're replacing, and that's what's happening if people look and aren't afraid to see it and aren't afraid to say it and admit it. That's what's happening. It was happening slowly. Now it's happening pretty quickly. And it just takes people noticing. It takes people not accepting it to change it. Otherwise, there's not going to be a change. If people don't actively see what it is, just like with the Second Amendment. Once you see all these steps about this that make it so difficult, then once you're able to go through all this, get all these papers for it, find one, you're going to want to show it off even more, because you have to work so hard to get something that should be a given. And that just, if it's a given, people can stay here and come here, then all these rights that are actually in the Constitution should be a given. It's like somehow in the Constitution they find it right for these gay people to pretty much take over. They're going to make laws about how to address them. That's where the hate speech comes into. You don't have free speech anymore if somebody sensitive is around. It's changing, as Tucker says, it's changing so quickly. And I think they may have pushed it a little bit too far, too fast. They're getting more people to wake up, but they don't know what to do. And I can see that. And one thing you should do is participate in these rights that we still have and not let them slip away. Another thing is, I'll put a link to that, is an email from the numbers people, and in that they had the phone numbers listed of some of these senators that were at that meeting for the Amnesty, or what they call it, the DACA renewal or situation fixation. They have numbers to them, so I called those numbers, left a message, and voiced my disapproval of having this continue or having it be legalized or whatever it is in exchange for securing the country. It probably doesn't make all that much difference, but at the very least, enough people do things like that, they'll know that we're still paying attention, and they'll know that regardless of what we're told, that on our own, we decide what we want, and we don't want this to change. Enough of us still like this country and still like the freedoms that it has. And that's one thing that we should hold on to, as well as really teach history. Teach it. The schools don't really teach the history. That's what people have to take it upon ourselves to remind people about that. They're not learning it, and it's learning it less and less. If they were, then people would know about Reagan's amnesty. So a lot of people, enough people, don't like him just for that reason. They act as if he opened the border and flooded it or something, and that's not what it was. That's not what it was meant to be, and I know that's not what he intended for. But some remember him as just that. And never mind all that other stuff, that the 80s was one of the best decades the country has ever seen because of that leadership, because he just had a way about it. And other than that he got everything right with it. And even during the end, when he was about to leave and he was taking questions, and they asked if you were able to, would you want to do 4 more years? And he said, well, if it took 4 more years, and that's because he did everything in the 8 years that he had planned and that he had said that he would get done, and he did it better than what anyone expected then. And this was with almost as much opposition as now. Maybe not much, but for that time, a lot of opposition and less other, what they call alternative media, and not the internet or anything, so more people could see and decide for themselves what was going on. It was just what you were told each night on the news. So despite the distortion from the news before people knew that they distorted it, he was popular because of what he got done. People could see that. So regardless of how they reported it, people could see the economic recovery that took a couple years, the same one now that took a couple months. And they felt safe. They could tell the way he talked, even his voice. Just he defined the 80s, and he defined it for the good. So it's too bad when people just think of him and think of Amnesty and how that started, when that really wasn't how it was. It got out of control after he was gone, and it escalated more and more and more, and now it's where it is now because of the people in between for the last 30 years let it get to this point. And so stopping it is something we have to do about it. But I just hope there's not any kind of amnesty, because the deal before was that would be it. And even though it's been 30 years since the deal is a deal. You say that once, that it's once. You shouldn't have to hope people forgot so that you could say it again for the same thing once it already happened. That's the word should be good like that. And so that's what we'll watch and see what happens with this. But those are some reasons that I hope that no kind of amnesty does go through, and that we get the border security, and that people voice how they feel about it. They aren't afraid of the backlash, aren't afraid of what people will think about them, aren't afraid that everything's racist and everything's bigotry, and disagreeing with what the globalists tell you should think, that you're bad for it. It's good to think the opposite and say the opposite of what they want. And I hope more people continue to do that.